Okay, so we are in the middle of chapter 22, the trait of humility, the Midas HaNova. Again, just technically pointing out, so usually, he has the explanation of the trait, then he has divisions of the trait, and then he has the way to acquire the trait, and that, right, and things that to take away from the trait. So usually it's like broken down into 4 sections. Anova is broken out into 2 chapters. Basically, this chapter, which is called the explanation of the trait of humility, really has the compartments, the divisions as well. Okay, I'm not sure why he did it that way. Why specifically by Anova he combined the explanation of the Mida and the Chalokim and the parts. So really what we are studying now, what we're going through now, is really the Chalokim, is the divisions, the subdivisions of the Mida, right? So again, just to summarize, so Anova is divided primarily into thought and action, right? And then action, we have 4 actions that are considered part of Anova, right? So what are the 4 parts of Anova? The 4 parts of Anova were Hanhaga, certain practice, right? Savlanut, patience, escaping of kovad, right? So we're going to do now. And on the other hand, so you escape kovad from yourself, but you give kovad to others. Okay? So again, so keep that in mind. So escaping of kovad from yourself, but giving kovad to others. Okay? Fine. We'll come back to that. The only thing that was, so last time we were confused about some of the Chazal that the Ramchal was bringing, some of the statements, right? For every of these 4 hanhagos, I mean, we saw the first 2. Every hanhaga, every practice, every expression of Anova in action, right? Ramchal brought a statement, a few statements, right? A few statements for each from different parts of Gemara, Medrash, whatever, right? And we were confused about the purpose of some of them and what they mean and how he brought them. And again, I don't want to go through it. It's going to be too technical if we go through. I tried going through over the course of the week, trying to go through all the members. It gets very technical, but definitely a common thread seems to be that almost, and we mentioned it last time, but I just want to point out that the common thread seems to be that there is like a reward, meaning all of these Mamar Chazal are built on irony. Meaning, you're gonna if you're gonna have Anova, you're gonna have Olam Haba, right? You're gonna have Anova, Kovad will find you. You're gonna have Anova, right? So meaning there's the opposite of what, right? Meaning since the general kind of structure is, since Anova is built on some certain level of self-effacement, right? So you technically have to give up something to achieve a nova. So there's always all these statements of Chazal come with a certain reassurance that the irony is that you giving up is actually a gain, and then vice versa. Your gain is actually going to be a loss, right? That seems to be the general structure when it comes to a nova, because I guess at the end, a nova seems to appear like a sacrifice, and the Gemara, I guess, wants to reassure you that sacrifice is really at the core. Is really an acquisition, is really a gain. Okay, so that's it. Let's keep going. So let's keep going. So here we are. Sina. So this is the third of the 4 expressions of Anov. Sina Sarabonus, right? To despise positions of authority. Ubrichas hakovid, and running away from honor. So Mishnah Arucha, right? So it's an explicit Mishnah. Hoivas hamalacha. You should love labor. Usnai sarabonos. You should hate management. V'omer oid hagas liboy b'hayra. Somebody who is too certain when it comes to hayra, to paskining, right? Shoyta rosha v'gas ruach. Again, we tried going through this Chazal. What's the shoyta? V'omer kol aroid v'achar hakoved. Anybody who pursues kovid, hakoved b'reach miyana, right? So this is an example, right? If you run after kovid, so you think you're gaining, No, it goes away from you. I'll take the riv my hair. The pasuk says, "Don't go out to strife." Lariv means strife, my hair. But we Gemara Darshans don't go to larav, my hair. Meaning, don't be a position of authority. You should not run after positions of power. Lama. Right, the word srara just point out. So srara is in this week's parsha, right? The last words of the Aliyah in the morning that we read now. Ki histarer aleinu gam histarer, right? That Koirach and Dasan Aviram accuse Moshe, the on of Mikol Adam, that you histarer aleinu gam histarer. You have over what's the word? You overreached, right? You overreached your what's the word? Your power. Okay. So anyways, a person should not run after srara. Lama, why not? Because of what will happen in the end. People will come to you with questions. What are you going to answer them? Right. So with power comes responsibility. I guess that's the point. Oid Shom Rabbi Menachem or B'Shem Rabbi Tanchum. Rabbi Menachem in the name of Rabbi Tanchum, Kol Mekabel Lolov Srara. Anybody who accepts upon himself Srara, a position of power, Kidei Lehanais Mimeno, in order to benefit from it, Eina Lakanoy Fazesh Unena Migufa Shel Isha. He's like an adulterer who benefits from the body of an Isha. Right. So we saw this last time. We were not clear about the parable over here. Mm-hmm. Right? Why is it? Meaning you're taking on something that's Kodesh for yourself, right? And that's what the next statement really says. Anini Kreisi Kodesh. I am called a Kodesh, holy, meaning Hashem says I am Kodesh, I'm holy. Unless you have all of the midos that I have, you should not accept upon yourself srara. Right, so that's why I guess it connects the kiddushin, right? When somebody marries, it's an institution of kiddushin, right? Separation of. So when a person takes srara, he basically takes on a role of a kodesh, of a kodesh baruch Hu in his place, and so that's why it's for his own benefit. So I guess that's what it means, that it's like a noyef, like an adulterer. With Talmidei Rabban Gamliel yechichu. And the story with the students of Rabban Gamliel prove. What did they prove? I'm not sure what they prove. Because they were in a position of poverty, right? And they needed income, and the only income was available was a position that would require them to become managers, right? Mm-hmm. And they did not want to accept upon them this position because they didn't want to be in a position of power. So what did he tell them? So he responded to them, you think I'm giving you, kingship, right? I'm giving you servitude. I'm giving you servitude. So again, I'm not sure what he wants to prove from this. I'm not sure what he wants to prove from this story. Yechichu, their proof. Mm-hmm. The proof that what? I mean, the Art Scroll points out that the responsibility basically is not worth the power, right? The responsibility is not worth the power.
Negative sum game.
Right. So that so meaning it's going to backfire. The point is that it's going to backfire, right? Mm-hmm. It's going to backfire. So that people, like you said in the beginning, people will come to you with questions or requests or whatnot. What are you going to answer them? At the end of the day, every position of power means people are coming to you, and people are coming to you. You're going to. It's in the end, it's not going to be worth it. Okay. Fine. They said furthermore, oy loy l'rabbonos, woe to the people in position of power, shemekaberes es baileha, that buries its owners. Okay? How do we know this? From Yosef. Since he practiced b'rabbonos regards to his brothers, he was in a position of power. Meis koidem echav. In the end, he ended up dying before his brothers. So this is the general principle. So authority, position of authority, is nothing but a great burden. Asher al shchem anoisei, which is on the shoulder of the one who's carrying it. Kiad shaha'odam yochid, when a person is singular, right? V'yoshiv b'soich amoy, when a person is just a regular Joe Schmo, and he's sitting amongst many other Joe Schmoes in his nation, muvlo bein anoshim, he is swallowed up amongst other men, right? So but ridavim, that's what he seems to be saying.
Right.
So why? Because when you're just a regular Joe Schmo, eina nitpas ela alatzmos. Then you're only responsible for yourself. Kivan shnisala the rabbanos v'srara. As soon as you pick yourself up to a level of rabbanos and srara, kvar hu nitpas al kol mishetachas yodem shaltoi. You automatically are responsible for all those that are below you. Okay, and under your jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because it's your responsibility to watch over all of them, and to shepherd them, to provide for them knowledge, and wisdom, and to straighten out their deeds. And if you don't do that, then their sins is on your head. Right? And so our sages said, their sins is on your heads, is what's written. That's what our sages say. Okay? So again,
it's difficult to understand.
In what sense?
I mean, it wouldn't. If everyone is a soldier, there's no commander, right?
Right. Somebody has to be. Right. As a matter of fact, it says b'mokom shein you should have ish, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a place where there's no man, you should become a man.
Right. Now, here his point sounds like an easy way, not an easy, but an easy way out.
Right, and I have a different problem. I have another problem is, okay, I mean that's great advice. Let's say we take his advice. That's great advice. What's that got to do with Anova? Right. He's telling you practical advice. Listen,
yeah, but if
don't zачем тебе too much? Okay, take it easy, relax, do your thing, and let others take care of the big questions in life. Just for your sake, why should you die sooner than others? Why should you have all the stress? Take care of yourself and let others burn.
Moreover, if everyone reads this, then whoever is volunteering for the authority, for the position of authority, sounds like give them a bigger honor than the regular Jew Shmuel. This guy is going for a losing proposition.
Right.
Right. I understand he's doing his own kavod, but that's obviously not the derek. But
yeah, I'm not sure. You have any suggestions, Boris?
No, not really. But also that don't they have the cholesterol? Everybody responsible for each other, so they're responsible anyway.
I guess that's an interesting point. That's a good point. I mean, there's clearly there's indirect responsibility and there's direct responsibility. There's certain levels.
The thing is that indirect like leadership or direct leadership. Like if there's no one else there, you do it not because you want to be a leader, because somebody has to do the job. But if you want to be a leader, you have to be a leader. That's different. The leadership,
I'm not sure I understood that last point.
No, there's nothing leadership. If there's no man, you became a man.
Right.
But again, in this case, somebody becomes a leader because it's necessary, not because he wants to be a leader. Just it's necessary to function. So it's not for COVID. It's just for going forward and just get things done. It's a different leadership.
That's meaning you're answering it. You're answering differently. You're answering that he's talking about specifically somebody who people what's the word? People yearn to be in a position of power, right? People want to be in management. And he's saying, no, I'm saying the situation will arise when you have to be a manager. Okay, so then you'll have to be a manager. But you should not be a manager because you want the power, you want the covet, you want the, So, right. So, okay, that's a good point. But with regards to your point, in terms of Kol Yisrael Marevim Zelazeh, that everybody's responsible for one another, I think, right, what he's saying over here, he was very interesting. He said that you're nitpas al kol mishatachas yodem shalta, that you're responsible. It's more than responsible. Nitpas means like you're like will be grabbed for anybody who's under your jurisdiction. But why? Because ke'alov lehashkiv al kulam. It's your responsibility to watch over them, liroy soisom, to shepherd them, deya, to teach them knowledge, ulahaskel, right? Meaning, when people are, right, I see some Jew doing some sin, I'll go out and I'll try to, tell them, listen, maybe you shouldn't do such a thing, right? On the other hand, when people are under you, right, so they suspend, so to speak, their judgment because they have you to think for them. In a certain sense, people become stupider, and it's your responsibility to be 2 steps ahead and to make sure that, because you are only as strong as your weakest link. So if there's a weak link in your team, so to speak, who's responsible? It's not the link; it's you. It's the leader of the team leader that's responsible. So he has to be like, think through of all the. Okay, fine. Anyways, all right, moving on. But okay, fine. Yeah. Okay, so that's good, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So avoid position, meaning don't. What's the word? Don't desire positions of power. Okay, fine. Let's keep going. Right? And honor is nothing but hevel havolim. Hamavir es odam al daitoi, that kind of what's the word? Takes a person off tracks. Valdas koinoi, and also takes him away from the mind of his creator. Okay? And the person forgets all of his responsibilities. Somebody who recognizes this, that kavod basically derails a person, then he will definitely hate it. And the praises that other people praise him will be nothing but a burden. When he sees that they exaggerate their praises, and about things that are not, he doesn't really possess. Instead he becomes embarrassed, and he sighs. That it's not enough that all of the things that he's lacking, right? And that he's lacking all of these things. But rather that they exaggerate those misfortunes by praising him, right? The contrast of the praise with regards to what he doesn't have, right, is what makes him even more dejected, right? And again, this is I think in perspective that if anova is really I don't really have anything, that technically even for the things that quote unquote I do have and people praise me, that it's also inappropriate for me, for the honor, meaning because I don't really have those things. God help me here, God help me there, I'm a nothing, and then all these people are praising me like that's making me uncomfortable. Okay, right? So 1 second. So he's running away from COVID, and he hates positions of power, and yet, what's the fourth chelik? A chelik Ravi. What's the fourth chelik? Hu chaloik hakoved lekol adam. The fourth chelik is giving honor to every person. Right? So he's going to become the thing that he hates others to do for him. He's going to turn around and do it back to them. Okay? And that's a sign of humility. Okay, let's see. A chelik Aravi, hu chelik hakoved lekol adam, is to give honor to every person. V'chein sheninu ezehu mechubad, who is honorable. Hamechabed esabriyas, somebody who respects, who gives kavod to briyas, to creations. V'omru oid minayin hayodeh b'chaveiroi shu godol min afil davar echad. If a person knows that his friend is greater than him even in one little thing, shechayev linag boy kavod, he's obligated to give him kavod. Oid sheninu havim maktim b'sholom kol odom, right? That you have to be maktim sholom kol odom, right? You have to be the first one to give kavod to each person. So I'm not sure what he wants from this, because meaning it sounds like what he's saying is, why are you being maktim kavod chodam? Right? Two people are walking. Everybody says, well, he should say hello to me. I know I should say hello to him. Who should be saying hello to who? So he seems to be saying that, at least here, he seems to be saying that I am being the first one to give kavod, to give shalom, to show that it's not about, I'm smaller than you. But in other places, it seems that a smaller person, I think we discussed this once, that a smaller person should not maybe say shalom first. You should wait for the bigger person to greet him, because maybe it's chutzpah that you come to. Okay, so I don't know. So he brings from here that seems to be saying that maktim is a sign of humility, meaning it sounds like you're lowering yourself. Okay. V'omru oilov v'omru olov al Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. V'omru olov al Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai shelo hiktim loy odom sholom oilam afilu goy b'shuk. Fine. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai always says hello first. Ubein bedibur, bein b'maisim chayiv linu kavod b'chaver. Whether in speech, whether in action, you're obligated to show kavod to his friends. Ukvar sipur zechonim levrocham me'esrim ve'arba elef talmidim Rabbi Akiva. Right, we know the story of the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva Shemesu that died as shelo hoyu noegim kavod zelazeh, because they were not noeg kavod for each other. And since bizoyin is something that is associated with Rishoyim, when we already mentioned this pasuk that says when Rosh arrives, so does booze, meaning not booze that you drink, but meaning embarrassment, and not just embarrassment. I don't know how to translate this. Scorn. You translate this as scorn. Okay. So to kavod is something that's associated with tzaddikim. Because kavod rests with them. Ve'enam ispareish mehem, is not separated from them. Ve'oimer, as it says, v'neged zkein of kavod, in regards to in front of zkenim, right? The sages is kavod. Okay, so I'm not sure what he wants with this idea that kavod is associated with tzaddikim. It sounds like he has something else in mind. I'm not sure what. Okay, fine. So again, I'm not clear why is it that I should be. But we're going to come back to this again when he talks about the next chapter. Why is it that I dislike the fact that people praise me, but I'm going to turn around and give kavod to everybody. Unless kavod does not mean. Right now, I'm going to just assume that kavod does not mean, wow, what a great guy you are, amazing. This American, what's the word? Overpraising of everybody, flattery. I don't think that's what he means by kavod. I think by kavod means, a person comes in, you get up for him. A person, you say hello, you greet him with respect, you treat him with respect. You don't demean somebody. That's what I think he means. I don't think he means this flattery. Flattery is not kavod. Flattery is just that. Flattery. Yeah. Okay. Fine. Iranian virus again. So we read this paragraph before, but let's just finish it off. Right. So we explained the divisions of Anova Haroshim. Right. So again, that's what I'm saying. That this chapter goes into the divisions. Upratehem b'chol protehaminim, but their sub details, right, are like all the details of all different categories. Hamisrachim that expand v'holchim lefi hanoisiim, and continue to expand according to various variables, right? Lefi hanoisiim. So different scenarios will call for different expressions of anova, right? Ulefi ha'itim, and according to the times, ve'amekoymes, and according to the places, right? Yishma chacham ve'yosef lakach. A wise person will take and will increase his teaching, right? So in other words, these are the general ideas, but how are they applied? They are applied according, with your own seichel at their own proper times. Okay, right? So certainly anova removes a person from many stumbling blocks, right? Meaning the inner anova, right? So remember, we just finished discussing anova that is in thought and anova that is in deed. So he's saying for the anova that's in thought, mesira miderach odem mechsholis rabim, removes from a person many stumbling blocks, and brings him closer to many good things. Why? Because Onav doesn't care too much about worldly things, like and he doesn't become jealous in the things that are havolim, that are empty. Again, so I think that's all with regards to the thought of Anova. Now he says, and furthermore, that the company of an Onav is pleasant, right? Why is it pleasant? Why is it pleasant? Because we just said he himself is not going to seek honor or authority. He's going to praise others, and he's going to have savlanut, right? The second was savlanut. He's going to have patience with people, right? So shechevras Onav Noah. So the company of an Onav is pleasant. And the spirit of the right. Basically, people have nachas from him. Behechrach, so therefore, as a result, he's not going to come to anger, meriva, and non confrontation. He's going to have hashket, peacefulness, right? Because he's going to speak benachas. That was also one of the things. Hakol b'menucha, everything with menucha, with rest, not rest. What's the word? Serendipity. I don't know. Okay, right. Praiseworthy is the one who gets to this midah. We already said that whatever chokhmah makes a crown for its head, akava makes it a heel of its shoe. Right. So whatever is the crown of wisdom, which is what? Yiras Hashem. Yiras Hashem is the crown of wisdom, right? We said that before. Yiras Hashem is the crown of wisdom, but Eikav Anova Yiras Hashem. The heel of Anova is Yiras Hashem, right? So in other words, the beginning, the end of Chachma is Yiras Hashem, but the beginning of Anova is Yiras Hashem, right? Ki kol hachachma kula lo yarcheno. All of wisdom cannot contain Anova v'zeh borer, and that's clear. Okay. Fine. So yeah, let's move on. I don't know how much of this we're gonna get. Let's keep going. Okay. So now we're moving on to chapter 23. So b'derech kniyas anova, right? How do we acquire anova? Okay. So again, so how would you, if you wanted to acquire anova, how would you acquire anova? Right? How would you acquire anova? Let's say if you were to recommend to somebody, how would you acquire anova? What would you tell them to do? Person has a gaiva problem. What would you tell him to do?
Read the chapter before.
Right. So contemplate, right? Internalize and contemplate, right? Good. So that's one. So the other thing is let's see what he says. There are two things that are margil, that habituate a person to anova, right? So first, right away from that expression, you see that anova is not a conscious act, but rather a habit, right? Shnayim heim hamargilim es ha'odam el anova. There are two things that habituate a person to anova, right? So if a person is not an onav, he has to change his nature. How do you change nature? You change your nature through habit, right? It's something that we are what we repeatedly do, so to speak, right? So what are the two things? Haragilus. So there's something that you do, regilus, habit, v'hizboinen, and contemplation, right? And it's interesting, again, he mentions regilus first, and again, I'm going to repeat this, we've said this already probably 3 times. Again, remember his main point by Nova in the beginning was that you have to be an onav first on the inside before you become an onav on the outside. And we pointed out then, yes, that's true. You cannot walk around like a humble person, pretending to be a humble person when you're not. But if you're walking around like a humble person as a way to become a humble person with the realization that you're not a humble person, that's fine, right? As a matter of fact, that's what you should be doing. What he's saying is that the regilus. Regilus, what is regilus? What is this habit? A person should habituate himself little by little in acting with shiflus, with lowliness, right? That was the first of the 4 expressions of anova in action, right? Hisnahik, hanhoga, of acting b'shiflus, with lowliness. In exactly the ways that we mentioned in the previous chapter. A person should sit in lowly places, and walk in the back of everybody else. Dress in modest begodim. The hainu mechubodim. What does it mean, modest? Modest means that they should be honorable, right? They should be normal, but not too beautiful, right? You cannot dress in a degrading fashion. They have to be respectable, just not overly flamboyant. When a person habituates himself in this way, then eventually from the outside, anova will seep into his heart, little by little, until it really becomes set within him. Right? So again, so anova, he says, it is a quality that can be acquired from the outside in. Right? You would think, oh, how could a anova be acquired from the outside in? But that's what it is. We're going to come back to that. Let's see. So now he kind of elaborates on this point. Since the nature of the heart of a person is to fly and to raise himself, right? The nature of a person is to be a Baal Gaiva, right? The nature of a person is me, right? So kosher olav la'akar mi'ikra netiya ativis hazois. It's very hard for a person to uproot this very natural inclination, right? Elem kain, but the only way to do it is with pu'ulois achitzonios, through external actions, hamasurois biyodos, that are within his control. I can control how I dress. I can control how I speak. I can control where I sit and how I stand. Those things are within my control. It's much harder for me to control the way I feel, because now I'm going against my nature, right? So therefore, if I do that, yamshich me'at hadavar b'pnimiusoy, But if I control the outside, I will pull on little by little the thing that's inside me, which is not so much within my control, which is outside my control. Again, the irony of it, that my insides, right, are less within my control than my outsides, right? So I control. I do what I can, which is what's under my control, which is the way I act. So I act with anova, and eventually it seeps into my inside. Okay, so where else did we hear this idea? So he tells us, okay, inyan should be arno bezrizus. In the similarly, as we explained, as rizus, right? What was rizus? Rizus was alacrity, right? Acting with energy, right? In other words, again, over there also, the teva of a person is to be lazy, to be a rock, right? Afrurius, the earthenness of the person wants him to just be inert, right? There's a natural inertia that says don't do anything, right? And the way to change that, to go against the teva, is go out and do it, right? Be fast, and then eventually you will become energized, right? Go out and do things with alacrity, and you will become energized on the inside. So again, it's kind of interesting in the two places where Ramchal stresses external to internals, right, is anova, gaiva, right, or gaiva anova, and laziness versus energy, right? So the nature of a person is, in both of the places you have to fight nature, right? The nature of a person is to do nothing,
right, and want,
but be considered everything, right? I want to do nothing. I want to sit in my bed and do nothing, but I want to be praised as if I conquered the whole world. That's my nature, right? Again, you see this with kids, honestly, and teenagers especially. Teenagers, COVID by them is very important. They've accomplished absolutely nothing, but they want to be considered as if they really won the Nobel Prize, right? But that's the teva. Again, the Ramchal is telling us that's the teva of a person. The teva of a person is do nothing but get credit for everything. Fine. So shekol zenichos again. So this idea of using your externals to get to your internals, shekol zenichol b'mamarim zechron l'bracha, that is included in their statements. A person should be, what's the word? Hitri, with his fear. Should be clever when it comes to fear. He has to think of strategies neged ateva that go against his nature, and his inclinations until he can overpower them. Okay. So that's the regulus, right? So that's the first. What's the word? That's the first strategy that he gives you how to acquire anova is actually through action, through regulus, through let's call it brute force, right? As opposed to the next one. His boy name. So, but the next one is contemplation. Hu alinyonim shonim. You have contemplations on various matters. Okay, so there are different types of contemplations that can internalize anova into a person. Okay, so we'll see. I think there are 4 altogether. Also, four things that he doesn't list them properly, but okay, we'll see. Anyways, so ha'echad, the first one is hu hamuzkar b'divrei akavi ben mahalalel. Right. So the first thing is the one that's mentioned in the words of Akavia ben Mahalalel. Right, this is the first Mishnah in the 3rd chapter. Da, you should know me'ayin ba'asa, from where you have come. Metipas rucha, from a spoiled, what's the word?
Drop.
A spoiled drop. Right, putrid drop. And where are you going? To a place of earth, decay, and worms. And before whom are you going to give din v'cheshbon? Before the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He. right? Ki be'emes, because in truth, kol eila, these three contemplations, heim negdiim, they're like the opposite, they're like opponents, legaiva, to haughtiness, to hubris. Ve'oizrim ela anova, and therefore they help for a person to achieve a nova. Okay? Again, I just want to point out the obvious, right? And he's very precise in how he quotes it. The words of the Mishnah of Akavia ben Mahalalel says, look at these three things, right? And you're not going to come to what? He doesn't say to Gaiva. He says, Aveira, right? In other words, if you can contemplate these three things, he's not talking about meaning Akavia ben Mahalalel, despite his name, Akavia, which means like the heel, right? Mehalalel is halal, praise, right? Makavia ben Mahalalel is a very interesting combination of names. It's just, Kavia means the heel, Mahalalel means the praise, right? So again, that contradiction. But he's telling you, Kavia ben Mahalalel is telling you that you should remember these three things as an antidote to Aveira, to sin, right? He's not telling you how to acquire a nova, right? So Ramchal is not using Akavia ben Mahalalel directly, which is why he doesn't say, if you read carefully, he said, right, the first strategy, hu hamuzkar b'divrei Akavia ben Mahalalel, is things that are mentioned in the words of Akavia ben Mahalalel, right? So basically he's saying, I'm just borrowing what Akavia ben Mahalalel said as a way to get out of Aveira, but those ideas are also the main ideas that you should think about to help you get a nova. Okay? So, fine. Let's keep going. When a person contemplates and stares at the lowliness of his physicality, of his matter, ugrius haschalosai, and the ugliness, kind of the lowliness of his beginning, right, of where he comes from. Ein loy tam linosei klal. There's no reason for him then to lift himself up at all, but rather leivoish v'likolim, but rather to be ashamed and embarrassed. Right. So he's gonna. Right, so Akavia ben Mahalalel said three things, right? Your beginning, where you come from, where you're going, and before whom you're going to give cheshbon. So now Ramchal is going to really dwell on these three things separately, okay? As meaning these are sort of three separate, almost contemplations, but it's really one, but it's like three different angles, right? And he's going to expand on it in a very interesting way. So let's see, right? So the first thing he's tackling is, where have you come from, right? Right, so the Akavia ben Mahalalel says tipas rucha. So he says it's l'mazadoima. What is that similar to? L'roya chazirim, a pig shepherd, right? A pig shepherd. I didn't know the pigs needed a shepherd, but okay. But a swineherd, right? Shehigia lemelech, that became a king, right? So a swine shepherd became a king. Kol eis asher yizkor yomav rishonim. Anytime he remembers his original days, it's impossible for him to become a Baal Gaiva, right? Because every time he remembers where he came from. Okay, so that's the beginning, and a very strange mashal, that he's comparing Akavia ben Mahalalel to somebody who, some lowly profession, who somehow was put into a very high place, right? So he feels like he doesn't belong. Okay, so meaning it's not his, right? The point is it's not his. He's an imposter. It's not his, right? It's not like he inherited this, comes from a long line of royalty. He got this position of power, and it's totally not his, and so he can never come to sit comfortably in that king's throne. And when a person contemplates that at the end of his greatness, right? So in the swineherd that became a king, but now he understands that after the end of his kingship, Yoshev La'ofer Maichel Telas, he's gonna turn to dust, food for the worms. Kol shekain, so even more so, sheikona geoinoi, that his hubris will be kind of lowered. V'yishochach she'oin gavosoi, and the horror of his gaiva will be forgotten. Right? The horror of his gaiva will be forgotten. Kimatuvoi, because what is the benefit? Umagdulosoi v'acherisoi boishus v'chlima. What is the good that he has, which is going to be end in embarrassment and klima and embarrassment, right? Meaning, again, this thing that I have is temporary, so it's not mine. It's going to disappear, and I'm going to go to dust. Right. So again, just pointing out that since he just told us that gaiva is just a natural inclination, right, that we have to basically put brakes on. In order to overpower it, we have to kind of strike it down. So that's why these contemplations are a way to separate, right? To, they say, for example, for let's say somebody who's like has anxiety, right? So that's an inner, right? That's their nature. They have anxiety. So how do they separate themselves from this anxiety, right? Right. So this is kind of a similar thing. You externalize it, so to speak. You have to be able to separate the anxiety from you, right? So that's what he's trying to achieve over here, I think, right? Meaning that he's trying to give you perspective that will allow you to separate your gaiva, which seems natural to you, and it's your natural perspective to separate from you to be able to see it from a distance. Okay, fine. So he talks about the beginning and the end. When a person continues to contemplate, the moment that he's going to enter into the great Beis Din, the great court, of the heavenly abode, right? So he walks into the heavenly abode. When he visualizes himself standing with HaKadosh, who is holy, v'hatahar, who is pure, b'tachlis HaKedusha, and an infinite of Kedusha, v'hatahara, and purity, and b'soit kedoshim mesharsei gvura, and he's also surrounded by the holy ones, meaning angels that are serving him, with strength, giborei koyach, full of power, oisei dvoroi, who do his will, asher ein bahem kol mum, they have no imperfections, right, no blemish, v'hu oimei lefnehem, and he's standing in front of this whole multitude of angels and God. Garua, he's lowly, pachas, again, another word for lowly, v'nivzeh, and English words, inferior, lowly, ignoble, mitzad atzmoi, by his very nature. But not only is he lowly from his very nature, Tomei, he's also Tomei umegoyel mitzad masa, from his actions, right? Meaning he degraded himself even more through his actions. Hayorim roish, will he raise his head? Hayil loy pischin peh, will he have the ability to open his mouth? V'ki shalu, and when they ask him, Ayei eifa picha, where is your big mouth? Ayei geoincha, where is your gaiva? Ukvoitcha, where is your honor? Asher nasasa be'olamecha, with which you raised yourself up in this world. Mayana, what is he going to answer? Or ma yoshev al techachta, what is he going to respond to their rebuke? Right? Hine vadai shelu rega echad. So it's certainly, if for even a moment, a person yitzayir ha'odam b'sichlo hemes hazeh, a person would imagine in his mind this truth, this reality, rather, all right, tzira miti, in the true picture, v'chozak, and strong, paruach tifrach mimeno kol ha'gaiva v'lo toshav v'lo void. All the gaiva will fly away from him and will never return evermore. Right? This picture of being a nobody that ends up a nobody, and then at the end standing in front of this perfect multitude of perfection, that picture is what a person contemplating on that picture, I guess, over and over again, will achieve a nova. Okay, let's see. What time is it? How much time do we have? It's pretty late. Okay, yeah, okay, this is probably a good place to call it a day, a night. Okay, so let's just summarize or review, recap. Recap is that we have a nova that's in thought and we have a nova that's in action, right? A nova that's in action is divided into four types, right? It has certain practices like walking with the bent head, sitting down in the back, right? Practices and hogas. It has savlanut, it has patience, it has escaping from kavod, and at the same time giving everybody kavod. Those are the four types, and as a result, and the way to acquire them is very difficult because you're going against tava, you're going against nature, and so you acquire it either from externals to internals or through contemplation. So the first contemplation that we saw so far is trying to break away from that nitiya, from that natural inclination to hubris, by giving yourself perspective, the perspective of the beginning and perspective at the end, and it's and the din v'cheshbon that a person, that moment of facing the Beis Din HaGodol in all of its perfection. All right.